Good morning, everybody out there in YouTube land. This is your T-shirt historian coming at you with another Dungeons and Discussions. All right. Hey, Silverlocks. Good to see you, bud. All right. So today's topic is what's the IP? And what do I mean by that when I say that? Well, hello, Mr. Grimm.
Hello.
Yes,
sorry. I was hypnotized in a layout zone.
Is it a really good layout?
No, but it's a rush job to try and hit free RPG Day, but I don't think we're going to make it. So it needs a bit
Lamentations?
More. For Machinations.
Machinations, yeah.
It needs a bit more work than I thought it did.
It's always the way it goes.
But I'm here.
I'm glad. Well, all right. Like I was saying, so today's topic, I say, what's the IP? And the reason I topicked it this is because we're going to have Mildred the Monk on tonight at 7. And it'd be great if you could join us on this one, Grim. But if you can't, I understand. And Mildred the Monk has apparently written a Final Fantasy TTRPG.
Uh-huh.
Now, I don't know if it's officially licensed or what. I'm going to ask him about all these questions and stuff tonight, because I'm sure we're going to have a whole bunch for him, because, Ironcaster's a big Final Fantasy fan, and I think Dash Attack is also. I am not a huge Final Fantasy fan. I played 7, and then I stopped when Eris died, because I didn't want to go on any further after that. I was already so upset. I played a little bit of 8. I did finish 10 or X, and I played a little bit of X2, and I did play a bit of Final Fantasy, what was called Final Fantasy 2 and 3 in the United States, but I think those were actually like 4 and 6 or something in Japan. I don't know.
I've played from what we call 6 onwards, plus some of the Mana games and Crystal Chronicles when it was on the GameCube. I really liked that one. I kind of lost interest after they made the transition away from turn-based combat in the main ones. So I think that was 12.
I didn't realize they had moved away from that.
Yeah, it's all been more sort of real-time combat and stuff since then. 12 was okay. I think because it was fairly limited in its implementation of non-turn-based combat, but it basically took away control of your companions, or you could swap between roles, but they would walk around doing stuff around you. And that seems to have been the model they've followed ever since. That's part of the reason I really liked Clair Obscur, is because it goes back to that sort of Final Fantasy VII turn-based element.
A lot of people have said that about Clair Obscur. I have the soundtrack for it. It's really good. I've never played the game yet, though.
I'll be curious to see what he's done, because there have been attempts at like non-official Final Fantasy RPGs before, right? There was the Returners Final Fantasy RPG in the relatively early days of the internet, which was a huge behemoth with amazingly complicated rules. And we've had a whole bunch of Japanese RPGs now come across, from a trickle to a relative flood, I think. So it'd be interesting to see how he's approached this kind of game in that way.
Mine was more like the stuff that was thrown out by the store, but still okay to eat. I liked X. It did get a bit repetitive with some of those dungeons, but other than that, it was kind of fun. And I really enjoyed all the cinematics, because that was when the cinematic stuff was kind of new.
Yeah, that was like PS2 era, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time it didn't feel like there was such a harsh transition between the cutscenes and the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
It felt much more natural to go from one to the other.
But anyway, like I said, since he's doing a Final Fantasy TRPG, I wondered about other IPs as far as RPGs go, and because we've been seeing a ton of them here lately. I mean, you know, as far back as like what they had Space 1999, the role playing game.
Yeah.
And of course, they had Aliens, the role playing game, several times. I mean, I have the old one from Leading Edge, which is,
yeah, got Terminator now. Was there a Predator RPG? I'm not sure that there was.
I don't think there's a Predator one yet, but I mean, there's a Shin Megami Tensei Persona RPG that's out there that I have. There's supposed to have been an Art of Fighting RPG, but I don't know what's happened to it.
Yeah.
It may have gotten tanked by SNK because their last game did not do so well.
Mm.
But I mean, you know, there's a lot of licensed games. I mean, Dune, obviously.
The old Leading Edge Games one goes for like $2,000.
Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's a thing. And of course, you know, Star Wars, which has several iterations at this point.
No, only D6. None of the others exist.
Yeah, I kind of tend to agree. Although I did run a 3rd edition version of it once.
Stargate's had a game.
Yeah.
D20.
Yeah, that was the modern D20 modern RPG era, because I remember we had that one.
Yeah.
There's just been a lot of them. I mean, I'm pretty sure, like, if you Googled a list of every single IP out there that has been turned into a tabletop role-playing game, I'm sure that list would come back, you know, in the hundreds pretty easily.
It's kind of surprising, really. I mean, I've tried to chase down licenses in the past, and for the most part, nobody was interested because there was just not enough money in the role-playing hobby for them to be interested. You know, it wasn't worth their while licensing out the IP and then policing you to make sure you were doing it properly. You know, it would have cost them more in terms of salary for whoever was doing that than they would have gotten out of, you know, a portion of the sales from whatever you were doing. That changed. I think during the D20 boom, there was a lot of tie-in stuff. And then because the development time was so much shorter and you could pump something out very quickly, very cheaply, without much need for playtesting and so on. So I think that got more tempting then. And then with Critical Role's continuing success, and they're on Rolling Stone, aren't they, this month? I think IP holders have seen that there can potentially be money in it, and so they've been willing to take a chance on licensing out those properties. But I suspect they're going to be disappointed in the amount of money it makes.
Yeah, I mean, what the hell? I mean, even TSR actually had some of those licenses as well, because
Diablo.
If you want to count like the Buck Rogers role playing game from way back when Gygax was still alive, because there was that.
Well, that was Our Lady of Pain's particular bee in her bonnet, wasn't it? Buck Rogers.
There was that one. There was the Diablo games that were pretty early on. I remember. I mean, it's just like there were just a ton of them out there, and some of them you didn't even know had licenses until, you know, and they're not the only ones.
Didn't they have a Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser tie-in? Lankmar, that was a old school D&D supplement, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing too. If you start looking at books as another form of IPs, God, the number just goes insane, because then you have, you know, of course you have Lord of the Rings, you have Wheel of Time, you had the Amber diceless role-playing game system, which I did not hear good things about, but I don't know for sure.
Shh, Pundit will hear you. You'll summon him. Weirdly, he loves Diceless role playing for some reason, or at least in its amber incarnation. Even Cyberpunk had Hardwired and When Gravity Fails.
That's true. Yeah, I remember When Gravity Fails. And I guess now Cyberpunk has kind of gone in reverse because they've gone from a game to a show. So
yeah, things go in full circle. It's interesting.
Yeah, and a video game. So, but I guess so did D&D. But the thing is, it's like, this is probably, I'm probably not the only one who feels like this, but when you're trying to run a game that is based on a specific IP, like let's say I decided I'm going to take a stab at running Lord of the Rings, the role-playing game, right? You know, the One Ring or whatever system, you know, you want to use, MERP, whatever. It creates a certain level of expectation in the people you ask to play it, especially if they're familiar with the IP.
Yeah,
and that's what makes it difficult. Like I famously ran a Star Wars game using 3rd edition rules for a group of friends, and my girlfriend at the time was a mega Star Wars nerd, like you wouldn't believe. And this was about the time that the second film came out, and I'm talking about, Episode 2, not Empire Strikes Back, because we saw Episode 2 in the theater. And her comment at the end of the game session was, "Wow, I've never actually had anybody run a real Star Wars game before."
Mm.
And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "This was a game, but it wasn't a Star Wars game." So, that was kind of a crippling blow to my ego, of course. The one person you expect to be by your side on that and, shore you up a little bit or at least soften the blow. By the way, that relationship...
D20 is not a great fit for Star Wars. But yeah.
No, D6 would have been better, but at the time, the store was selling 3.0, 3.5, hot and heavy. It was in the 2000s, and that was the game that was flying off the shelf, and we were always getting new supplements in all the time because everybody was writing stuff for it, left, right, and center, untested, tested. Throw this into your game and watch it break your campaign. Kind of levels of feats, and Yeah,
so I think so. Let me set this up first. I think part of the enduring appeal of D&D is that it was first, but also because was kind of the generic fantasy RPG, right? Everyone's got a handle on D&D to some degree. There are knights and wizards and dragons and elves and dwarves and hobbits and all this shit that you kind of expect from fantasy. So you can sit down and you can play without necessarily having to know anything more about the game than you already know about generic fantasy that you've seen in films and everything, everywhere, right? I mean, maybe if you've seen Game of Thrones and you're sitting at a table that's playing more, I don't know, A Court of Thorn and Roses or whatever, there'll be a mismatch of expectations. But generally speaking, you've got an easy hook onto the game. And I think intellectual property games have some of that same hook. It's like everyone's seen Terminator, everyone's seen Aliens, everyone's seen whatever. And so you kind of know what you're getting into and what to expect when you sit down at the table. And so it's an easy in. I think that's why West End Star Wars, the D6 Star Wars, was so successful for such a long time as an introductory game to role-playing. It's because, this was before the dark times, so everyone knew Star Wars and loved Star Wars, and a lot of people who were interested in playing a Star Wars role-playing game were already into the expanded universe, right? Which was drawing on the role-playing materials a lot of the time for its information. So, that was really useful and successful in that way. And I think a lot of people are trying to do the same thing here, trying to find the intellectual property that will hook a whole bunch of people and act as an introduction to the hobby. I think I said last week or the week before, everyone used to be trying to get the Harry Potter license. That was like the holy grail of licenses. If we can get this, we can get a whole new generation of people into gaming. But she just did not want anyone else to play in her world. And now that she might be more willing, nobody wants it. So, yeah, it's a bit of an odd one. Sorry, I've talked a lot, go on.
No, you're absolutely right, actually. And that's a good point too. Some of these IPs are a lot harder to work with than others. There was that game company, a year or two ago, that famously put out all of those different licenses at the same time. Like, what is it, like the Rambo First Blood game? And
yeah, wasn't that the Everyday Heroes people? Wasn't it?
Yeah, Everyday Heroes. Yeah, they just put out like one IP after another, and I was just kind of like, how are you going to make any of this stuff work?
Yeah, and how did you persuade anyone to give you these licenses? Let alone all of these licenses.
Yeah. They must have paid a ton for those licenses. But the thing is, it's like there's a couple of problems inherent to trying to run an IP, especially if it's just based on film. And one of the problems becomes, if it's just a film, the only real knowledge you have of their setting is what you see in the film. So there's a whole shitload of world building that you either have to, synthesize in some way, or you either have to just kind of like forego it and tell players like, hey, they don't go into details on that stuff in the movies, and I don't know, so you're just gonna have to, kind of stop peeking behind the curtain here and asking for answers.
Well, I would have given for wikis back in the day.
Yeah. Now, this is, I hate to say this because I know I bring up AI all the time. I do, and I'm sorry, but this is one of the things where AI is actually pretty useful, because if you don't know about a certain topic or like a certain world or certain ideas in it, you can always ask AI to give you specifics or details. Or if you don't know something, AI can give you an idea about where to go with it.
Yeah. Just be sure and tell it not to make anything up and to provide references.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a really important safeguard these days.
Yeah. But like, okay, let me figure. Okay, like the Alien franchise. Okay, they've made a ton of Alien movies, and yet, have you not noticed that it is still like one of the most nebulous franchises that exists in a vacuum? Not to be pun intended or anything, because it's in space, but because really,
that may change with some of the new films and stuff, though.
Yeah, well, it might. Supposedly, there's going to be a new TV series that I'm actually kind of looking forward to seeing, even though I'm sure it's going to be garbage. But I still want to see it, and I want to be hopeful because
I'm kind of interested in Alien Earth, but not for the xenomorph.
Yeah,
because it says that there are other nasty alien species on board this ship, and I'm curious what else is on there. Probably we never get to see him, but
well, okay, Heretical Nerd. It has a massive EU now after all these years, but like think about it way back when Leading Edge Games published the first Alien role-playing game. At that time, there was only 2 films in the can, and then there was a book by Alan Dean Foster, and that was all the background we had on Alien at that time. And that book uses everything it can to flesh out their system. But for the most part, if you're a GM, you're kind of stuck for a lot of stuff. I mean, basically what I'm trying to say is, okay, if you're sitting down to play an Alien, the role-playing game, you're pretty much expecting that your big nasty that you're going to be running into all the time is going to be the xenomorph. And how old does that get after a while?
Yeah. Can I just say, Alan Dean Foster does not get enough respect, right, as a writer, because he does all of these tie-in novels with movies. Lots of people think that's all he does, but he's actually an incredibly masterful author. If you don't believe me, read his Flinks series and read Nor Crystal Tears and the Tarim Krang. Absolutely amazing books that everyone should read.
Mm-hmm. And nowadays, I understand the Alien EU has gotten bigger, especially with all the movies and all the prequels, sequels, threequels, TV shows, tie-ins, cross treads and retreads and horse treads and tank treads. But I'm serious. I mean, because it's been in Alien has been in everything. It's been in comic books. It's going to go to a TV show. It's been in movies, obviously. It's, I think, been on rides. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but,
it has.
Been in toys, been in cartoons, been in video games.
So here's a problem with intellectual properties, though, right?
Huh?
The Dark Horse comics, between the release of Aliens and Alien 3, great, fantastic. Carried on the story. We saw Hicks and Newt carry on about their lives. We had the Aliens versus Predator comic with the Japanese woman that's really good. I know that doesn't sound possible, Aliens versus Predator being good, but that story is fantastic. But then Alien 3 came along, right?
Yeah,
and that media, has supremacy. That's canonical. So, moment that movie came out, all of that other stuff becomes kind of extraneous, pointless. People don't regard it as legitimate, and that can happen all the time. So you might be playing a really kick-ass game of Alien, and then Prometheus comes out and just destroys everyone's enthusiasm.
Exactly. And the deal is, it's like, Prometheus actually kind of put tentacles into all these different other IPs to create, what's now being referred to as the Ridleyverse, because they made a link with the Tyrell Corporation, which is Blade Runner, of course.
Sounds like a Batman villain, the Ridley.
And then, of course, they already had Predator tie-ins and stuff. So,
that's a trend that needs to go away. I'm long past done with that trend. Honestly, I was never super fond of it in comic books. I was never a really big comic book guy to start with, but I always found it to be kind of a stupid trend. And to me, it breaks immersion and kind of disrupts what realism there is in a lot of the worlds. I get really sick of we have to link all of our IPs together so that, big shocker, it's not just an Easter egg. It's all a linked world. It's all canon now. These totally incompatible and incongruent worlds and stories all linked together now, even though they don't make sense.
Well, I mean, that's why we had so many crossover comics back in the day, like RoboCop versus Terminator and Terminator versus Predator or whatever. I mean, it's Terminator versus Batman, or I don't remember all the shit. But I don't.
Logic versus Prophet.
Yeah.
I don't mind when it's vaguely alluded to, right? So the Tyrell Corporation is mentioned on a screen in Alien, or there is an alien skull on the wall of the Predator spaceship in Predator 2, or in Soldier. It is implied that he's an earlier model of one of the Nexuses. Right, and he's being replaced by the newer models. I don't mind that kind of stuff. It's just because then you can pick and choose and you can mix and match. And you say, I like that element. I like that element. I can kind of see how this fits together, but it's not explicit. That's fine.
That's kind of where we have to take blame too. We're kind of to blame for that as fans of different IPs and stuff. because we couldn't just leave it well enough alone. We couldn't say, "Oh, cool, look, there's an alien skull on the background of the spaceship in Predator 2." I mean, what a cool little callback there. We can't just do that. We have to have a bunch of basement dwellers who don't know how to shave their neck run up and holler about, "I don't think now the xenomorphs had a war with the Predators, and it's all canon now." Just shoot me twice.
Well, I mean, okay. Here's the funny thing. Before, of course, there were officially licensed supplements for a lot of these games. DMs would go out and watch movies in the movie theater, and they would read books, and they would steal those ideas from those books and all this other stuff and put them into their games. I remember one guy who used to run a game, and his big book collection, the book that he loved the most was the Belgariath series.
Oh, love that series.
Yeah, so he used to like stuff things from the Belgariad into his games all the time. And all of us have done that stuff at one time or another. I mean, you read something and you get attached to it, and you're just like, "Oh, wow, that's cool. I'd like to put that in my game." And of course, you do your best to, incorporate it into the material so that your players will enjoy it. And for some reason, it just never quite hits that mark. I don't know why. I mean, just because either they're not as into it as you are, or they've read it and they have a different level of expectation. Or the worst case is when you get into an argument with a player over something that you put into a game, and then of course they're like, no, that didn't happen like that though. You're misquoting that, or you're or, that's not true. That can't happen because of this. And the Star Trek role playing game. Can you imagine trying to run the Star Trek role playing game now?
Oh God.
No, it's the My Table timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which timeline is this? And what happened now? And then what? It's like, well, according to what happened, Spock in episode 84 said, "This is true, but only from a certain point of view." It's like
we're playing DS9 timeline, and we're not doing Kelvin and the Chipmunks. It's not happening.
But Kirk's father saved the Kelvin in this timeline, okay? It's going to be like that movie, but except I'm going to make these changes to the film, or to the movie, to the game, okay? Okay, you got to roll with me on this, okay? It's going to be great.
I'll tell you this right now. If you players keep arguing with me about what timeline is what and what dilithium crystal goes where, we're all going to be playing the Spock's brain game here in a minute.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll show you some canon.
It's like, and then of course, players will try to come up with, well, what if we try to recrystallize the dilithium using, well, it says in the film, you can't recrystallize dilithium even in this universe. So you got to come up with something different.
You know what? Fuck you, the corridor's full of giant stamping blades and... Why
exactly
here?
Why is this even here? It's like, because it was there for that one episode.
Yeah, a Q shows up and turns you all into, toads and peasants or something,
Yeah. Pudding.
I honestly, I'm not kidding, man, but I think like between the Squire of Gothos and the Q episodes and all that other stuff, I think those were episodes where basically the writers were like, I don't know what the fuck to write today. I can't keep up with all this continuity. Yeah, because some of them really, really feel like it's like the writer just showed up and said, "You know what? I've had a shitty week. I'm going to go write a Q episode and just screw everybody over."
Now it's suddenly...
Sorry, go.
I'm sorry. It suddenly becomes very, very, very clear why John and Christopher Tolkien were so obsessively protective over their IP.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you are not going to make anything else canon. Not at all. No, don't touch it. Quit screwing around with it.
It's also why I'm very glad that we got guys like Frederick Malmberg at Conan Properties who are in charge of basically making sure that they don't do things like Conan going to the Marvel Comics and then Marvel deciding that Conan is suddenly wants to, test out his homosexuality with, someone or something. I'm just kind of like, Conan doesn't have a homosexual bone in his body, I don't think.
No,
So
that's kind of antithetical there.
Doom cares not for your penis.
yeah.
You want to know how not gay? You want to know how not gay Conan is?
I have a sword
There's
and it
an
does not go in that sheath.
It does not go in that sheath. Not door. No, it doesn't. But
Get to the
literally,
chopper.
there's a story. There's a story, a very famous one. It's one of the best Conan stories out there, where he spends virtually the entire time floating around on a boat filled with one woman and a bunch of naked guys. And guess who the only one he touches is?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the least gay person ever.
Yeah, probably so. I mean, not to mention
All them dicks didn't touch one.
and he's so big and strong. It's kind of like, are you really going to try to take it from him? No. Quick way to die, sir. But regardless, okay. I mean, and yes, and Conan has been an IP from way back. I mean, I have the book, the deities book from the original box set of D&D that has the Conan stats in it. So, I mean, you know, IPs in our games has not been it's not a new thing. People have been doing it since the games first started because, of course, anybody who had an imagination. I mean, okay, Gygax himself was pulling ideas from like Jack Vance books and stuff to build his game on. So there is
nothing new under the sun.
Say what?
Nothing new under the sun.
Well, not necessarily nothing new under the sun so much as it's just like, you know, we all crib from things that we enjoy, you know, and that's just been the way it always has been. I mean, you know, it's not necessarily that anything is original or not original, or it's just, you know, all of us can watch something or read something and imagine, you know, it's like, this would be cool if this went this direction, or I'd sure like to see what happened if this film lasted a bit longer. I mean, that's what the entire Walking Dead franchise was based on, which, by the way, there's a role-playing game of that, too. But basically, it was like Robert Kirkman sat back and he was just kind of like, you know, I really love these Romero Walking Dead, these Romero, you know, Living Dead films. But what would happen if we went beyond the context of the film and saw what happened in a longer timeline? So basically, that's what he did. I mean, The Walking Dead was basically, you know, like Night of the Living Dead or, you know, Day of the Dead or Dawn of the Dead, except it was extended out, you know, months and months and months and years past, you know, watching civilization, you know, rebuild itself from nothing and squabble with itself. Of course, the only problem with that, 10 seasons of Walking Dead. And then, and then like, you know, five seasons of Fear the Walking Dead, and now we've got Walking Dead, Dead City, and Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon, and then we've had like all the little, we had like the teenage Walking Dead shows, like 2 seasons of that, which I've never seen those, but I heard they were terrible. But everybody tells me that stuff. Don't watch that. It's some crap. It's some zombie movie, but I like zombie movies. I don't care how bad they are.
It does look like we're going to get that final Living Dead film from his descendants and the IP holders, and it looks like it's mostly going to be based on the alternate script for the third film. That'll be interesting.
But will The Walking Dead use combat wheelchairs to be all inclusive? Hey, I will have you know, okay, the most popular figure I ever painted and posted to social media was Zombicide. When they released their second edition, they have one figure, one miniature, one character who is wheelchair bound. Now it's a mechanized wheelchair with all kinds of, you know, cages and stuff put on it to protect him from the zombies. But, you know, I painted it up and put it on social media. Everybody loved that because, I mean, I guess they just loved the idea of, you know, a guy running around on his little four-wheeled wheelchair combat buggy thingy.
There's only one use for a wheelchair in the zombie apocalypse, and that is when the zombie horde is coming. you can very easily just push the wheelchair and then run the other direction. It's like, here you go. It's like I've just weaponized cripples to save myself from zombies.
Well, I mean, in this context, I mean, I guess they figured, okay, the guy's is just as viable as anything else. I mean, he's sitting there with 2 MAC-10s, just blazing away at zombies and stuff.
But Fear the Walking Dead had a character in a wheelchair.
Yeah, it did. But that's kind of like the whole Zombicide IP. Zombicide is like a little bit more irreverent, and your average character is more than a match for any single zombie or even a small group of them, as long as they're smart, because they're they have their brains and the zombies don't. The zombies just mindlessly walk towards you and attack you if you happen to be in the same spot with them. And even the TTRPG plays that way too.
Like, I'm perfectly fine with a character in a wheelchair as long as we can stop having riders on the short bus. That's really all there is to it. But yeah. I mean, it's just there's so much of that stuff that I'm so over. And Walking Dead to me is just a classic example of why did you not end this like 5 seasons ago, back when it was good? Oh, that's right, because it kept printing money long after that.
Yeah, considerably less and less every year, though.
Yeah, but still money. I mean, it's like, when you're printing money, you're still printing money. And it's like, we'll eventually milk it dry.
Well, something to remember about Walking Dead, and it's something you can't apply to the role-playing game. Or maybe you can. But one of the things that made the Walking Dead TV show so popular was the fact that character survival was not guaranteed.
Yep.
We saw characters that people loved get eaten left and right and center. And I remember the comic book was the same way. You'd see a character hanging out and talking and stuff and being happy, and then like 2 panels later, they were getting their face ripped off by zombies. So that's the thing. It's like, if you ran a Walking Dead game, you would expect character death to be pretty high if you wanted to really maintain the quality of the Walking Dead series, because it wasn't until characters started having lots and lots of plot armor in the show that the series really started to drop. He'll be back. And that's another thing too. That's part of the thing about if you're trying to use an IP and you're trying to translate it to a game format. It's how closely to that source material are you going to cleave? Because if it's like Game of Thrones, where people were, again, in the early seasons when it was good, dying left, right, and center, and nobody was safe. If you create that atmosphere in your role-playing game, how many players are going to want to keep playing that? Especially these days where, people jump on social media and lambaste you and then curse your name to the gods and everything else if you kill their character. I'm serious.
It's the truth, and I get the point you're making there is 100% true. We live in an era where it's like, don't kill my character without permission. I mean, back when I first started my channel and was really diving into like the social media side of TTRPGs, I remember an argument that was just so alien to me that popped up on Facebook, where they were literally discussing how it was a violation of player agency that a character had been attacked by a vampire and his character turned when he failed to save. And it's like, well, you didn't have permission to turn that, to turn my character into a vampire. How dare you take away that player agency? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I didn't ask permission before the orc hit you in the face with an axe either. You don't have agency over what the bad guy does. That's why he's the bad guy. Anyway, I'll catch you guys next time. I got to go run and actually pretend to work.
Okay.
Right.
See you, bud.
See ya.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the thing. I remember the most egregious thing that ever happened to me, as far as an IP was concerned, was I was still like a young, stupid role player, and I didn't know any better. I think I was like 10 or 11. And at that time at our local game store, our FLGS, they had, hobby weekend or whatever like that. So they had an upstairs area where, people would get together and run games or play war games or whatever on the tables up there. And the store didn't charge any money for that. But, of course, their prices on all their in-store items were jacked up pretty high. So, gaming wasn't a lucrative thing even back then. But yeah, some guy decided that he wanted to run Dragon Riders of Pern, which I don't think anybody at that table had read, myself included. So it didn't mean anything to me. So he shows up and he starts naming off all these names and all this other stuff, and we're all just kind of like staring at him like, who? And then, of course, my character gets dissolved by something called the Thread or something. And I'm just kind of like, wow, that was fun. I don't even know what the hell happened, or I don't have context for any of this, or,
Did you touch the Thread?
Apparently I must have, because it, like I said, it completely destroyed my character. Because it did like so much damage, like an undescribably huge amount of damage. I'm just kind of like, wow. Now, admittedly, I was playing a stupid character at the time, and
they probably should have checked that people have read the books and given them a quick briefing.
Well, I mean, hey, Savo. Hey, James. I suppose so, but I mean, still, it's just a case of that was my first encounter with the Dragon Riders IP, Dragon Riders of Pern, and let me tell you what, I didn't want to read that shit afterward.
Did you ever?
No, I haven't.
They're pretty good.
Probably
They're pretty good.
Are they?
They're pretty good. Yeah.
Because I remember back at the time, Anne McCaffrey was pretty hot when they brought out all that stuff. So, but the cover art was always really good, Savo.
Let me see if I can summarize it for you. Okay. So, there's a human colony world from a science fiction society, right? And they colonize this planet and they settle there and everything's going great to start with. Then it comes close to another world in the same system, and they find out that the other world has this kind of alien pseudo-life called the Thread that migrates between the two planets whenever they come into conjunction. And this stuff just eats and devours and destroys everything it touches that's alive, right? So they lose a whole bunch of their colony. They use their shuttlecraft and like flamethrowers and things to try and get rid of this stuff, and they find that the fire works, right? Meanwhile, there is also a native life form very similar to what we would consider to be dragons that naturally breathes fire and so is able to protect itself from all this. So eventually they tame these dragons, they become sort of psychically bonded to them, and every time it comes around to the time of the Thread, these dragons protect the society. But even so, they've lost so much of their technological base that they're reduced to a sort of primitive pseudo-medieval society. There is still the colony ship in orbit, and it kind of tinkers with what's going on in the world now and again. But mostly it's centered around these dragons and the protection of the world.
Well, that would have been nice if, I'd have gotten that kind of a summary. I mean, I thought it was kind of unusual for, like a bunch of level 1 characters to have to deal with a Thread conjunction that early on in their, like the very first game.
Yeah.
So I'm just kind of like, yeah, I mean, young me would have been bored out of their mind, I'm sure, through the rest of the game, because the rest of the game didn't last that much longer. Yeah, and they live in caves, and musicians are revered.
This is true.
Savo has obviously read the series.
Yeah. These are details, but I think my summary would have probably got you at least interested enough to engage and play. But
yeah. well, not just like showing up to the game and it's like, okay, threads are falling. What are threads? Oh, you use fire? Okay. Okay, so yeah, I got hit and I got eaten totally. Okay. Well, that's great.
Mind you, that's what green slime used to do, so, you know.
True. But I mean, like, you had all kinds of stuff in place to deal with green slime. Apparently this thread was just like,
Didn't have much in place to deal with the green slime. You had to hack your limb off before it dissolved or burn it with fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Savo, it's one of the few definitively girl series. Yeah, that's what I've always heard. That and ElfQuest. Although I liked ElfQuest and I'm a guy, so I don't know what that says about me. Actually, my very first girlfriend, that's how we got together, was I saw her reading ElfQuest. But
I see you like malformed magical creatures. Well, here I am.
Hey, come on, that Wendy Peeney artwork was beautiful. And there was an ElfQuest role-playing game that wasn't really too bad. It was made by Chaosium.
It was, wasn't there? A Ringworld?
Yeah.
Chaosium did as well.
Yeah. And let's not forget, okay, we had Sandy Peterson on. Yeah. And at that time, I remember telling him that, that I played the Ghostbusters. That was actually probably my first role-playing game besides D&D. Because I actually went out and bought a box set of Ghostbusters. Yeah. And he said that game was actually good. I said, yeah, it was. And he said, and the D6 system we used for that is the same one that we ended up using for Star Wars.
Yeah, a very simplified version thereof. But yeah, it was Ghostbusters game was great for bringing people into role playing again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people understand how huge the Ghostbusters IP was around that first movie. It was everywhere.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, it had a movie, it had action figures, it had a cartoon, it had a soundtrack that was, on the charts all the time. So yeah, that's another big IP.
Yeah, I had a glow in the dark Ghostbusters T-shirt. It was fantastic.
I never had one of those, but I don't think I had any Ghostbusters stuff. I mean, T-shirts or anything like that. I may have had a Ghostbusters T-shirt, but
not even Ecto Coolers.
No, I drank an Ecto Cooler once. Yeah, Mom didn't really get me a lot of sweets, and it was relatively late in the year, or in my years, I should say. So it was kind of like the toys came out. I wasn't really interested in the toys because they looked kind of stupid, and at that time I was really hardcore collecting GI Joes. And now there's a GI Joe TTRPG.
Yeah. Bringing us back on topic. So what isn't a role-playing game, an official one at least, that you would like to see?
Oh, of a series?
Yeah. Books, film, comic, whatever. Something that hasn't been done.
Something that hasn't been done, and an IP that hasn't been put into a role-playing game?
Yeah.
Huh. Let's see. Blade Runner's been done, and it seems like it's pretty limited as an IP. I don't know how you would actually run a Blade Runner RPG. I mean, yes, there's a Blade Runner RPG out there, but I mean, what do you do? I mean, if you serious, I mean, it's like if you play a Blade Runner, it's going to be pretty much like, okay, replicant of the week.
Yeah.
If you're a replicant, if you're a replicant, it's going to be like, okay, this week we try to survive not getting murdered by Blade Runners, and that's pretty much the game. I mean,
you could organize and commit acts of resistance and so on. Yeah,
I suppose you could try stuff like that. I mean, your GM might even be generous enough to let you, overthrow.
Yeah. But we have that, so it's not something that hasn't been made into an RPG. Come on.
Well, there's two actually. Okay, first off, I would love to see Westworld made as a TTRPG. Now, how you'd go about it and the mechanics of it, I don't know. I mean, I certainly don't want to necessarily get into the HBO territory. I mean, some of that was good, but after the first season, it really started going into Shitsville.
Just the original films then?
Well, the original one, yeah.
Westworld and Future World.
Future World wasn't even really part of the series. It was like an add-on, that was kind of like a cash grab.
They did draw on that for the HBO series quite strongly, though.
Towards the end of it.
Plot, yeah.
Towards the end of it, they did.
I mean, we had Dream Park as an RPG, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Using Fusion, I think, which is close in concept to Westworld.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it'd be interesting. Would you want to concentrate on the behind the scenes weird stuff, or would you just want to, you're an executive who's going to play at being in a Western?
Well, ostensibly, the fun would be actually playing in the parks, because it's kind of like, it's almost a more modern society friendly role playing game if you think about it, because it's like your character shows up as a whatever from whatever background, or they're not necessarily skilled with guns or swords or anything else, but because of the way the world is situated, they pretty much they can't lose as far as combat goes, and they can't really get hurt. Although, they can get manhandled, they can get roughed up and, stuff like that to a degree. But it's kind of like a safe role-playing game, really. And because, everything that you're killing in there is a robot, so you're safe. If you choose to act on some of your darker fantasies and stuff like that, it's a role-playing game. So even the characters that you're doing it to don't have agency. So
I don't know how you'd make that interesting as a game necessarily, unless you bring in some of those outside elements like corporate espionage and sabotage.
Mm-hmm.
The slow creeping awareness of the robots and so on. I think you'd have to do something with that. So
you'd have to. Which is also kind of like why I think the series failed, because it's kind of like the whole first season pretty much covered that, and then the whole park collapsed after the first season. And I'm just kind of like, okay, well, I guess we're never getting back into the park, are we? Because nobody would want to reopen that shit after all that happened.
And there was no way of really covering it up. So they kind of had to go with the Future World, replicants are replacing everybody idea, which they did, but it never really worked.
That and the stupid, using the flies and stuff like that, and the tones to control people was just kind of like, this is dumb.
I think for me, what I want has almost been an RPG a couple of times, and that is China Mayville's Tales of New Crobuzon series. Because there was an article in an old Dragon magazine around the 30th anniversary of D&D, I think, that was about that, but it was all D20 stuff, and it didn't go into enough detail to do anything. And then Gareth Skarka got the rights to do a game based on it, and as far as I can tell, never ever did anything with it. And I have no idea what the status of the IP is now, and I wouldn't be allowed to touch it, so there's no point checking. So, but yeah, it's a shame.
Well, there are other IPs that would be interesting. Like I would love to see a Fist of the North Star TTRPG, but there isn't one that can exist officially, and closest we can get is Lone Wolf Fists, which brings up another point, which is systems that emulate the RPGs to the point where it's pretty much it's this IP, but we ripped the serial numbers off. We filed them off. Like Sacrifice is Berserk with the serial numbers filed off. Lone Wolf Fist is Fist of the North Star with the serial numbers filed off. But if there was an official role-playing game I would like to see made, and I think would have legs enough to be able to kind of maybe stand on its own, it would be Ghost in the Shell.
Hmm.
because that has quite a bit of lore behind it now, like enough to where you could actually flesh out and create a whole role-playing game and just build your whole, your whole thing around the IP, and it would be successful. I mean, you could have tachikomas and, ghost diving and everything else. Now, you could use other systems to emulate this, like Cyberpunk or Cities Without Number, but to have an actual Ghost in the Shell IP licensed role-playing game would be pretty cool. And I mean, I remember famously we had the Bubblegum Crisis RPG from Artal Saurian Games, and
which was fusion and so broadly compatible with Cyberpunk, which was great.
And that kind of worked. And maybe that's how Ghost in the Shell would have to work. It would have to be, let's take this particular framework of rules, and then we'll just layer the specifics of our IP on top of it in order to make it a good game. And honestly, I think those are better choices than them trying to build a brand new RPG from the ground up, because it takes rules that you're already familiar with, and all it does is it just kind of fixes up the setting.
I'd want quite a hard-edged, like realistic system to play Ghost in the Shell in, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there was a D20 Stargate game, and I think there may be another one coming.
There was
something.
D20 Modern had a Stargate role-playing game. Ian M. Banks? Okay, you're going to have to give us some examples on that one, because I don't know Ian M. Banks. I'm woeful.
Consider Phlebas. The culture's great. You should read his books. Trying to remember the names of some of them. It's worth it just for the names of the ships in it. They've all got great names. Use of weapons, I think. Consider Phlebas, player of games, use of weapons, state of the art, accession, inversions, look to windward, matter, surface detail, and the hydrogen sonata. They're like sprawling space opera, but non-cheesy space opera. The culture is this kind of future techno-anarchistic human society where basically technology can do just about anything. And so people get bored and go out into space to do fun stuff.
There is another one that would be interesting, I think. And it would be more viable. And I'm actually kind of considering cribbing some of it. But the Takeshi Kovacs books.
Yeah, there was talk at one point of a game for that. I don't know if anything came of it.
It seems like it would be fun, but it would have to be... I think it would be more fun if it was during the early parts of, the whole thing. Just because, the whole exploration and using your... using your sleeves to, basically create generational exploration and stuff like that. I mean, you could still do murder mysteries and all that kind of stuff, but the way they've got that world set up is it's so foolproof. Like how could anybody get away with anything?
Yeah.
Yeah, Vampire Hunter D would be a pretty good TTRPG, I think. I'd really like them to make it a full-on anime series, but apparently they're allergic to money, or...
That might be a fun little project. Like, call it Fangs of the West or something, and or Fiends of the West.
I mean, it's got a technological edge, it's got a mutation edge, and all that other stuff, so... I don't know enough about the book series. I've never read them, but a lot of people who read them said, "Oh, they're really good," and I'm just kind of okay. Well, take your word for it.
I'll tell you one thing: Black Oath's games, which are mostly like unofficial versions of other people's IP, it's made me feel a lot less self-conscious about nicking ideas.
Yeah, Yeah, Alex is he's a good dude, and yeah, Sacrifice is pretty much that's his game, and it's like Berserk with the serial numbers filed off, and it's good. I mean, it's genuinely scary, but at the same time, your characters feel powerful enough that they can survive in this kind of crazy world. And then, of course, he did the super duper smart thing, and he introduces play as normal humans, not just the sacrificed. And it's kind of like you could see the power level difference, and it's kind of like, wow, you really could build a neat game up off of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's still thousands of IPs out there. You know, some of them in foreign countries and stuff that you've probably never heard of. That would be really interesting to have as a basis for a TTRPG. But you know, like again, the whole thing comes back to, it's like if you try to run it, how well is it going to work? I mean, you know, what are your players' expectations going to be? What are your expectations going to be? You know, who all has read it, who all hasn't seen it, or you know, how difficult is it to do this, and how difficult is it to do it well, and how difficult is it to do it where it lasts a long time, where it's not just like a one-off game session.
Yeah. I think I might make an official inquiry about the new Krobers and stuff, just to try and find out what's going on. Just need to find China's agent and see what they say.
That'd be a big feather in your cap if you could.
It would. There's no way in hell that I would get it. My reputation is too short to be given anything that big. But it's a shame. I would really like to see something done with it. China's done some other stuff that I would be interested in. I have an almost autistic love for weaponized trains, right? Like the Soviet Union used to use, right? Where you've got like tank cannons and shit on carriages. And he's got a world called Railsea, where basically the world outside the cities is just covered with train tracks everywhere, and there are all kinds of trains everywhere, and some of them are pirates and stuff. And it just really appeals to me because of those sort of weaponized war trains and things. I've been trying to figure out a way to make it work, either as a board game or a card game or something, since forever. I can't get a handle on it, but I love war trains. Fantastic.
Hey, everybody's got their thing, man. Mal says, what about a good version of the Dresden Files? Well, I mean, see, that's the thing. All those mystery kind of series like Dresden Files and what is it? Not Bureau 13, but that show with the dude who played the old dad in Lord of the Rings, and I can't remember. It was a J.J. Abrams piece of shit. So, X-Files. Yeah, Fringe. Yeah,
Fringe
all
was
these.
Great.
Yeah, all these TV shows and stuff like that, who are pretty much kind of like Monster of the Week. That's what I call those, because it's kind of what it was. It was like, you tune in every week, and it's like, oh, look, new monster to deal with. And then, of course, you probably had like an overarching plot that was building up as the season went along, which made for good television. And you could do the same thing with your role-playing game as well. But the thing is kind of like, on those, I feel like you probably shouldn't deal with a specific IP.
Yeah.
I feel like you're better off with a generic system and just adding elements of those things to your game to make it feel like that, rather than just...
Warehouse 13 would have made a brilliant RPG.
I thought it was an RPG, was it not?
No.
Yep.
Steve Jackson Games had a series of supplements called Warehouse 23, which is also the name of their online store. where they just kind of imagined what else was in that warehouse where the Ark of the Covenant ended up.
And see, that's kind of what I mean. Like, it's like mystery of the week, monster of the week, whatever.
Yeah, I've got a half-written game that's meant for playing out analog horror scenarios, because that's big, and I find it interesting and innovative. But the idea of that is just that you'll be able to do whatever you want with it. And it's mostly like tips how to build tension and a system that mostly gets out of the way. I might finish it at some point. Stranger things have happened.
But see, let me jump back, and it's like, we mentioned the Ghostbusters RPG, Shinatsky, but so Westworld is run by Critical Role. Yeah, no kidding. Okay. Yeah, Masters of the Universe probably would be a good TTRPG. I know Chris Fields kind of started working on an idea for it that was basically He-Man with the serial numbers filed off, but I think he has kind of given up on it. I don't know why. Maybe I should give him a nudge and say, hey, can we do this? Come on, I need some artwork. Because, he used to commission me for all kinds of stuff. But, okay. So Blade Runner is an investigation game a la Gumshoe. You don't just retire replicants. Okay. See, that kills me. I would love to buy the Blade Runner role-playing game, but if that's all it is an investigation game, I would be bored out of my damn mind playing it and running it. Because as a DM, if you're running a purely investigation-based game, you're just kind of sitting there waiting for the players to grasp the obvious or grasp the nuance or the details and say the right things in order to move the plot along. And that's not very interesting for me. It's one of the problems I have with modules that require stuff like this. It's like... A classic example is like, okay, let's say your characters get to a trap or a puzzle that's, a puzzle lock or a trap or something that they have to get past in order to proceed through the rest of the dungeon. And they're basically stuck there trying to figure it out. And you as a GM are just as frustrated as they are because it's like you can't tell them anything to help them progress. And if you're a good GM, you don't do bullshit like introduce Deus Ex Machina dude who shows up and fixes the problem for them. So you're stuck there having to wait for them to figure out a way past it. And to me, that is not interesting. That is not exciting. It slows the game down horribly. And I don't want to inflict that on my players. I mean, now you probably do have a set of players out there who really eat that shit up and enjoy it, Ooh, yeah, give me more puzzles. I want to sit here for 2 hours to try to figure out how to get past this door. That's why, this is why, they invented barbarians to get past all that bullshit to kick in the door.
Players get fixated on shit that they don't need to all the time. Like last tabletop session, there's some stone heads, which are in my background, poking up out of the ground. And they were convinced there must be something special about them. There wasn't. They were just stone heads.
Ooh, there was a tank police RPG. Okay, Savo, there was a Highlander RPG, but it wasn't called that. It was it was called Immortal. Or no, it wasn't called Immortal. I think it was actually called Immortal. Not to be confused with the other game Immortal, but it was something to that effect. And it actually came out, I want to say like around the same time that Mage first came out for White Wolf. And basically...
There was a fan RPG of Highlander for White Wolf that was out as well. And more recently, Evil Genius is one of the IPs they released.
Evil Genius. But anyway, But the one I remember, the rules were so close to Vampire the Masquerade that literally I had a player at the table who didn't want to play a vampire. I said, well, okay, you want to try this? And just handed him the Immortal book, and we were able to make it work. That's how... But it was a published book. So I wish I remembered the name of it. But how much fun would the Highlander RPG be, though? I mean, that's pretty much, it'd be like, Immortal of the Week.
Yeah, well, I think back to the Adrian Paul series, which was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
All things considered. And, he had his friends amongst the Immortals who he didn't, instantly cut their heads off.
Uh-huh.
And, you have problems like mortal people from your past to deal with and passing your material goods down to yourself, pretending you're your own son or something. There's a bunch of other issues. And his friend was a thief. That's how she kept herself occupied throughout eternity. So yeah, there's other shit you can do there if you play it a bit looser.
I suppose. The problem then becomes a case of, it's like, well, Adrian Paul only had like one or two friends per story. He didn't have like an entire, coterie or party of. So it's kind of like, yeah. So these six immortals just kind of hang around, and even though they get mad at one another, they don't, duel each other and slice each other's heads off when they get pissed at each other.
Yeah, Sava makes a good point. There is a lot of sword stuff to nerd out on.
True.
So you would need either a fairly deep or a narratively focused system where a slight edge can mean a lot. Whether you've got more reach, what the environment you're fighting in is like, those sorts of things. You might even want to go as far as Riddle of Steel, which was an attempt to bring medieval martial arts and SCA experience into tabletop role-playing with mixed results. I quite like it, but other people don't.
I'd have to take a look at that one.
You can get it for
like
free online now. Riddle of Steel. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, we're not really solving any major problems here with IPs and games. It's just more or less like a discussion about them. It's because what can you really say about it? It's like everybody's going to have something that they like, and they're going to want to inject it into their RPG. If I saw something cool in a movie, or on from one of my TTRPGs, or from one of my board games or something else, and I want to throw it into a game just to mess with people, is like, I've done it before. I've done it on TV. It's like one of my adventures I ran for Cities Without Number was the monster was based on this horrible thing from Kingdom Death Monster called the Spidicules. Just because I thought, this thing is terrifying. Why don't we just throw this into a game and see how people deal with it? It got overpowered really quickly by one of the characters. Yeah, that's always fun. Build something that should have, kind of brought the characters to like the edge of panic and created some terror and everything else, and it's like, nah, player just destroys it in one round. It's like, okay.
Sometimes you get lucky.
Yeah, it happens. Sometimes the player builds their character up way too powerful within the rules, but still, it's just a case of that's not really cool for everybody else, is it? Anyway, so I don't know. It's like there's so many good IPs out there, and at the same time, I would like to see a lot of these things turned into TTRPGs, but at the same time, I kind of fear it. And I kind of think games do best when they take elements of these things and put them in their games. And if they're recognizable, you generally get more sense of enjoyment out of it, because it's kind of like, I knew where they got this from. You know, how many times have you been reading through a game manual or something and you see something going like, oh, I recognize that. I know where that came from. Never?
Can't think of any.
Huh, the Gargoyle RPG.
So that may be being derpy.
Well, I mean, like, I'll give you an example. Jesus, my brain is hurting today. I need more caffeine and I need more sleep. But the Arduin books, one of their adventures, I think it's Howling Tower, has a creature in it that has one red eye, and it will basically follow the party around if you befriend it, and it will say things, and it will shoot them and all this kind of stuff. And it's basically a Cylon from the 1980s Battlestar Galactica show.
By your command.
Basically, yes. It'll say things like life forms approaching at X miles per hour at a rapid pace. Things like that. And it's cute if you figure it out. The PCs don't know what the hell it is, but the players are sitting there snickering because they know behind the scenes like it's a Cylon. Like I said, I think things like that are more fun than when you actually have to go and play Battlestar Galactica, the role-playing game. Which I think was a thing, actually, wasn't it?
It may have been.
If it wasn't, it should have been, because that one would have been wide open. Is there an RPG based entirely on Hindu cosmology? Yes. It's called Arrows of Indra, and it's by RPG Pundit, as far as I know.
Yeah, that mythology as a basis is another one of my vague Somewhen projects.
Also, there's quite a lot of Hindu / Eastern creatures and stuff like that in Pathfinder First Edition, and I'm guessing Second Edition. They really opened up the door on that stuff.
With Battlestar, Margaret Weiss Productions released a core book with a quick start guide and a screen in 2007.
Wow.
It was very focused on season 1 of the reboot show.
Mm-hmm.
And it had some photos from season 3 episodes. It was a slightly older version of Cortex before they updated it. And I'm guessing they lost the license at some point and then stopped.
I kind of think the ending of that show kind of turned a lot of people off.
Yeah.
It turned me off. So, in fact, I noticed pretty much all the stuff that was pumping for that show kind of died after that last episode finally released, that last season.
Yeah, bad endings are really... It's weird how they... Well, no, it's not weird. It's understandable, but the bad endings really sour people on IPs.
Oh, yeah.
That they were, up until that point, mad for.
Yeah, can you imagine trying to play a Game of Thrones RPG, and while the show is still going, and then all of a sudden you get to season 8, and you try to run a game of that, and everybody's just kind of like, we already know how this ends.
Yeah, there was a Game of Thrones RPG when it was just the books that were out. So.
Yeah.
The Buffy RPG was shite, but the Angel one was quite good, despite them being the same system.
I don't know about an Army of Darkness RPG. I mean, how much legs would that actually have? Yeah, BSG ending. Yeah, BSG ending killed Caprica. Yeah, it did. It did kill Caprica because nobody was interested in it after that. Plus, Caprica was stupid too. I don't know, but that's the thing. It's like, as go your shows that affects your game. I mean, it's like, let's say that you were hot and heavy on your Star Wars game, and then all of a sudden the Acolyte came out, and it's just kind of like, oh,
yeah,
okay. guess what? Way back in the distant past, the Jedi were actually all, like cucks and like weak and, and stupid. And the Sith were actually like, kind of charismatic and all this other stuff. And apparently lesbian space witches did everything before the Jedi. Or the Sith. So I don't know. That's the problem, I think, with IPs, because IPs are sort of a living thing with their own cosmology. And as they've proven, they don't care what the previous continuity was. Because, I mean, you can go back through the Alien movies, you can go back through the Friday the 13th movies, you can go back through any movie series you want to think about. And usually there's continuity errors throughout everything that came past the first show. Doesn't matter what it is, but there's usually something wrong with it. And in some cases, they just completely, totally forgot about everything that came before in order to push on the next show. Kind of like how Dany totally forgot that, there was an entire fleet of ships loaded with ballistae that could shoot down the dragons, and she just happened to be flying in that particular sector of the sea, and these things apparently have, sea whiz level targeting because they're able to shoot. 3 of them are able to shoot down her dragon on a moving ship that's bobbing up and down in the ocean.
Yeah. So there is a flip side to playing a game and then having the actual IP holder screw it up for you. And that is that you can look at what's going on and say no, right? And the game gives you an opportunity to do it your own way. It's like, fuck you. I'll make my own Star Wars with blackjack and hookers.
That's true. Yeah, that is also the good thing about having an IP based thing. It's kind of like you can always at some point just ignore what happened in the IP. Now you have to deal with irate players possibly, but I mean at the very least, you can sit down and you can say, okay, look, we're going to play the Fallout role playing game, and I know that the Amazon series is continuity canon now. However, we're going to throw out some of the stuff that's canon, like Shady Sands being destroyed. And I bet there's a ton of Fallout players out there probably going, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But speaking of which, I'm still excited to watch that next season. And that is a role-playing game based on an IP, which is...
I like Chernowski's idea. We could make a game called Studio Notes based on that. Right, but the trick is, right, you structure the game like a heist. So like you have to prevent the thumb drive getting to the location with the updated script, so you need to steal it and swap it out.
Yeah, like plot by Guy Ritchie.
Or assassinating the terrible actress she wants to put in the lead role.
Oh yeah. Shit like that. Yeah, she's running her mouth on social media too much. She's going to tank the film. We need you to go and quietly liquidate her.
We need her shadow banned, if you catch my drift.
Yes. The bad press is coming out. We need you to go. Quietly, take care of this YouTuber. It's making too much noise. Yeah. Let him go, Boogie. I don't know. That would be kind of funny. Speaking of which, kind of as a side note, and this is totally off topic, but also kind of fun and would be interesting. If we're talking about IPs, I started watching The Gentleman, like the series and the movie, and then I went back and looked at all the different Guy Ritchie IPs because I had just finished watching Mobland. And I'm just kind of like, this is where Guy Ritchie really shines, is when he's doing British crime drama. That's just thing. Rock and Rolla was good. Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels was great. Snatch was fucking awesome.
I have a British crime RPG that's like 90% of the way there, but it doesn't quite gel. Called Diamond Geezers. So at some point that will come out.
That should come out, because That's what I would like to do. Is like if they're gonna make something, they need to make like the Snatch verse or the Richie verse, and it's all just and it's everybody plays a Brit, and depending on where you're from, you can make the funny accent, and then
it needs a guide to rhyming slang. And,
it does. You can do it with AI now.
True.
I've done it. It's pretty funny. But that would be just awesome. I mean, you'd have to figure out like all the ins and outs of what you're going to be doing, as far as heisting or stealing or taking out rival gang members or throwing full on gang wars or whatever, but
but mostly without guns.
Yeah, mostly, although they seem to have them when they need them.
Well, you can't take Gangs of London seriously. It's well over the top.
I was about to say, Gangs of London, they're running around with like rifles and shit.
There's that scene in The Craze, isn't there, where he tells these people to come and meet him for a shootout, and they just turn up with like clubs and stuff. He's like, no, go and get a shooter. I wanted a shootout, like cowboys. Get the fuck out of here.
Would you believe I think I actually have that clip? We'll get copyright struck for sure, but not struck, but we'll get copyright claimed for sure if we do that. But for you guys out there, I'm willing to do that. So here it is.
Cool.
If it ever loads up.
Yeah, what do you think, Puff? It's a fucking tool. No, it's not. It's a fucking rolling pin. Who are you, Fanny Craddock? What are you gonna do with that? You gonna bake me a cake? You gonna sing me a song, watch me blow out me fucking candles? I come here for a fucking shootout, right? A proper shootout with some proper men. Like Colonel Custer and Geronimo. Have you ever heard of them? No. Because you were too busy in your penny baking fucking fairy cakes, weren't you? Rich, this lot of fucking nonsense to a man. They're fucking nonsense. Get out of your fucking way. Go on, get out. Go on, fuck off. Call yourself a fucking gangster. A shootout, right, is a fucking shootout. Like a western. Wankers. Fucking embarrassing. Waste of our time. Fucking waste of our time.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. Guy Ritchie RPG would just have a Jason Statham sheet. Hey, these days it would be Tom Hardy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it would be Tom Hardy would be in everything because Statham seems to have graduated to becoming like everybody's vigilante / ex-assassin. All this.
Well, I'm glad we have him because we needed a new set of action stars. I don't know who's going to come after him, but yeah, he's convincing at least.
He is, and he's a big dude. I mean, apparently he was putting on so much muscle when he played Bane in that Dark Knight Rises film that he was uncomfortable. Like it was like
that was Hardy.
Yeah, that was Hardy.
Yeah,
he was he had so much muscle that it was like literally causing him physical strain on his body because he had put so much muscle mass on. It was like almost dangerous to that point, but he still looked too small.
Yeah,
he did. I mean, it's like how hard is it to get like like a nearly 7 foot tall Hispanic person who's like buff as shit to play Bane?
Well,
I mean,
apparently quite difficult.
Apparently, because they've never done it yet.
Yeah,
that and the whole voice is like, "You live in the dark. I was shaped and molded by it." Just kind of like that was too much to deal with. I mean, the first time I heard him talk in that film, I was just kind of like, "You have to be fucking kidding me."
Hardy is a great physical actor, though. He doesn't need to say much, right? I think they probably made a mistake in having him say so much in that role.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
He's much better when he's understated.
But he is a good actor, though, and I like him. And
seems like a nice guy as well.
He does. He does seem like a solitary kind of guy too.
Yeah.
But yeah, a good crime RPG would be would be pretty fun, but you'd have to figure out how to make that work too. So you'd have to. That would be a little bit intricate. That would be maybe a combination of a little bit action, a little bit investigation, a little bit problem solving.
Yeah, it's not that difficult. You just need to kind of track how much heat is on you and how close the cops are.
Yeah. Once again, Cities Without Number has that metric already built into it. Just saying, we got to get back to that. Bronson was away, but okay, Shanatsky, come on now. Bronson was in a class all his own. The guy didn't have a whole lot of facial expressions. He didn't have a whole lot of acting range, and yet
of Mandem.
Yeah, he probably smelled like Mandem most of the time, which I don't know how that smells, but yet the dude managed to land a super duper hottie for a wife. The dude painted art, and he was legitimately like one of the toughest tough guys in Hollywood. I mean, when he's on screen doing push-ups and shit like that, that's really him. That's not like a stunt double. In fact, they said that he was constantly, doing push-ups or sit-ups or whatever like that between takes on some of his films, just so that he could maintain how physical he looked if he had to take his shirt off or something. And there will never be another Charles Bronson. I mean, nobody could get away with doing cinema the way he did nowadays, If one had to write a written description of Bane's voice, how would you?
A small man at the bottom of a well shouting while trying not to breathe through his nose.
And sounding vaguely like a cockatiel impersonating a human voice.
I was shaped in the dark, molded by it. You merely used the dark. I didn't even see the sun until I was a man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know why he chose to do that. I kind of feel like that was Christopher Nolan, just kind of going, okay, I've got to shoot, 5,000 more takes and reels and all this other shit. I don't have time for Hardy to do it again. It sounded fine. Let's go. I got to get this movie in the can and out in the theater. That whole movie sucked. I mean, not to get on a sidetrack rant here, but I will for just a moment, just to say that we saw that in the movie theater. And I remember even then kind of going, this is dumb as shit. The entire police force got conned into going into the sewers. The entire police force to the last person. I mean, and nobody like, National Guard, Army, anything else was deployed to enter the city. I mean, we have complete total air superiority, and we couldn't have, dropped a few, things on top of them. Not to mention when the cops were finally released from the sewer, they all looked fine. Like, they had a, clothing iron down there and showers and 3 hot meals a day, despite having been trapped down there for like over a month. I mean, if I don't wash within 3 days, I really start to look like a scumbag. I can't imagine being down in a sewer for a month in the same clothes.
Apparently, Hardy took part of the inspiration for the Bane voice from a guy called Bartley Gorman, who was a bare knuckle boxing champion from about 1972 to about 1992. And he was an Irish traveller living in Wales. So it's kind of, gypsy, Irish, Welsh behind a mask, apparently.
Yeah. I think he was channeling Bronson, which this is a scene from Bronson.
Shut your fucking mouth! No problem, Charles. Shut the fuck up, you cunt! Shut it!
Good movie, by the way. I only watched it once, though.
Yep.
Might have been a reference to the incongruity between Mike Tyson, the boxer, and his effeminate voice. Yeah, I don't think I would tell Iron Mike to his face, Iron Mike, that lisp makes you sound really effeminate. He would probably say, did this fist in your ass feel effeminate? How about this? How about this left cross in your jaw? Does that feel effeminate too? But anyway, we're digressing. We're getting way off topic. I think we've pretty much covered the IP thing. Although, you know, it's a fun thing to get back to and talk about. I mean, we should probably do this like once a year and just see like what IPs have come out in the last year and were interesting and sucked and
Yeah. What cash grabs have been shat out in the previous 12 months?
Indeed. Well, like I said, you know, tonight we are going to be talking to Mildred the Monk, and he did the Final Fantasy TTRPG, and I'm not as excited to talk to him about it as probably Ironcaster is, but I made the effort. I want to hear about it. I want to see what he did. I'm curious about the game, how it runs, and what systems he uses.
I have to finish this layout. I've been pulling 9 a.m. till midnight work days for the last few work days, either side of the weekend. But I will be sure and listen in at least if I'm up and still working.
All right. Well, I'll bug you on Discord. But anyway, thanks y'all for hanging out with us today. I hope you enjoyed it. I don't necessarily know if you learned anything so much as that there are lots of TTRPGs that have been, you know, based off of IPs, both, you know, books, TV, comics, whatever. Are they good? I guess, like, for a final word on it, I would have to say, no, they're not. They're not. A game that is solely limited to a particular IP, no matter what it is, whether it's Lord of the Rings, whether it is, you know, a comic book franchise or a movie franchise, whatever. A game that is totally limited to just that IP world, that IP monsters and everything else is not good. Because one, you have to deal with player expectations, you have to deal with your own expectations, and you have to deal with the limitations of what that world has established, unless you're willing to break out of that and just create some really gnarly new things and really shift the dynamics around in order to accommodate both your players and a longer lasting format. And again, I'm going to cite the Aliens RPG because it's like a case of, if you're going to play the Aliens RPG, your primary opponent is going to be xenomorphs no matter what, right? Because that's the main monster. You know, I guess for fun, you could have a predator show up just to throw players off. But since it's been, you know, that's part of the continuity. But anyway, it's you know, your players showed up expecting to be horrified by xenomorphs. That's what you're going to do too. So that's why I say it is better to take an RPG that you're already familiar with and you know and you understand the system and dabble. Just bring in some of that stuff from the outside into it and kind of make it your own thing. I mean, and it's okay. It's okay to borrow ideas from authors and writers and movies and TV and comic books and whatever media you choose. It's okay to bring those ideas in and incorporate them into your game because people have been doing it since the first game was published. You know, like I said, Jack Vance, Gary Gygax. Thank you very much. It's okay to do these things. And players will usually cotton on to that a lot faster than if you say, I'm going to run a Star Wars role-playing game, and everybody's like, oh, okay, well, is this going to be before the Republic or after the Republic, or is this before the Clone Wars or during the Clone Wars, or is this in the, you know, the Awakens era, or, you know? No. Don't do that. Don't build up your players' expectations and stuff like that. Just, you know, if you know, one day, you know, you're playing your space role-playing game and, you know, you casually tell your players and you see off the starboard bow that, you know, of the ship, you could see that there's some kind of a spacecraft that suddenly its wings kind of click into an X shape and it has this familiar red streak down the side. They'll smile. They'll have fun. They'll know what the reference is. They'll get it. But, you know, I would say just avoid IP games. Or if you are going to use an IP, take the framework of their game and use it in a framework of your own. Don't wholesale use their stuff. I mean, it's like, okay, you like the Blade Runner role-playing game? That's cool. Use the ideas from the Blade Runner role-playing game, incorporate it into your Cyberpunk role-playing game. You'll have more fun than if you try to run Blade Runner set in the Ridleyverse or whatever they're calling it. I think. I mean, do you have any thoughts on
blood back into Conan?
Huh?
Edit the tits and blood back into Conan.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Do you have any concluding thoughts on this?
My concluding thought is not quite as bad as t-shirts. Most of them are going to be shit, but there are reasons. There are reasons why IP tie-ins are shit, and not every company falls for those reasons. If they've crammed it into their own system, the odds are against it. I would say Modiphius are largely an exception to that because they bend and warp and twist their rule system in all kinds of different ways to suit different IPs. But for the most part, if someone's just done it in their house system, forget it, usually. So it's usually a cash grab. Usually the game is not going to be very well supported, usually because the IP license generally lasts about 5 years, which is a normal publication cycle for a game, or at least it used to be back in the day. So you're not going to get a lot of extra material for it. So there's just, for a lot of the time, there's no need. It's just a naked cash grab. And if it gives you that smell, stay away from it, I would say. But not everything is like that. It's always worth a look. That's what I'd say.
Yeah. I mean, as always, I think the golden rule for RPGs is kind of like, take what you like and leave the rest of it at the salad bar.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us today, and hope we see you tonight when we have Mildred the Monk on to talk about his Final Fantasy RPG, which I hope is a good one. I really do. But until then, y'all take care.
Catch you later, Bill and Ted.
Peace out.
Look, the Dungeons and Dragons ride!